You join me today with another Mitsubishi Triton video, but this time around we're not shooting in Japan. This time around we're in the Philippines and we finally have our hands on the local spec of the Triton. Well, this is it, folks. We are finally driving the Triton on Philippine soil. Now, specifically, we're in Antipolo, where there's a lot of hills, a lot of uphills and downhills and whatnot. Now, we're in the top-of-the-line athlete variant. So it's got the 2.4-liter, 201 horsepower, and 470 Nm arrangement. The other models have the 2.4-liter, but with a single turbocharger, so 181 horsepower and about 430 Newton meters of torque. Now granted, the whole twin turbo thing sounds like a recipe for a Ranger Raptor, but it's not that kind of pickup truck engine, no. Because it has a 6-speed automatic transmission. Now, I honestly don't mind it because it's actually pretty well spaced, it's well balanced, it doesn't hunt for gears all the time. And because of the Myvic system, power spread is pretty even. Now, interestingly, it's not the pin you back to the seat kind of thing, but more of a gentle surge, and you're just going to be surprised at your speed when you look at the speedometer. I do have to point out that this athlete version comes with electronic power steering. It's light in the right places, and there's enough feel and there's enough sort of feedback for this sort of model. And of course, this being Mitsubishi, turning radius has always been pretty good. Now, the old Strada had a turning radius of about 5 meters from curb to curb, and I expect it to be the same for this Triton. First impressions when it comes to ride, and I have to say that, the ride is really much improved over the old Strada. Yes, there's a bit of scuttle, that's typical for all pickups, but it's a lot less. Body control is so much better in this one. And, remember, we drove this thing at 140 kilometers per hour around a bowl in Okazaki. So the chassis is good, shakes off the bumps pretty well, and it's not entirely jarring. And gone are the days that pickups, you have to break your back to ride in them and actually use them, and that's something you just had to deal with. But really, the true test of the new Triton is gonna be in the real world. Now, yes, we're driving it around, in the country right now. We're driving it around Antipolo. But really, if we take it out in the city and we try to really live with it, that's gonna be the ultimate test of the Triton. And it's going to take a lot to dethrone the de facto king of the segment, which is the Ford Ranger. Now, I know you guys have comments about the Ford Ranger when it comes to a certain thing called reliability. However, do have to say that, from a reviewer's point of view, the Ranger is a great pickup truck. So it'll be interesting to see how this one fares against the Blue Oval. Now, when it comes to the exterior, well, okay, it looks exactly the same as the Japanese spec model we saw at the Japan Mobility Show, and the one we drove around Okazaki, and the one that was previewed here a few months ago. Now, the bumper's the same, headlights, wheels, even the tire choice is exactly the same. There is one difference though, and that's the variant name. Now, yes, this top-of-the-line model is still called the Athlete here in the Philippines and in most of Southeast Asia. But over in Japan, it's called the GSR, so a bit of a throwback there for those 90s Mitsubishi fans or Lancer fanboys. Although the GSR name's always been used in other parts of the globe for the top-of-the-range, Triton / Strada and Montero Sport / Pajero Sport models. So yeah, would be nice to use GSR again, but we think, people have gotten used to Athlete, so that's what we get. Now, I am glad to report that the interior of the Triton is basically unchanged from other markets. Now, okay, the one in Okazaki was called an international markets model. So we've had them both in left and right hand drive, but regardless of steering orientation, the design's exactly the same. And more importantly, everything you see here, the switches, the dials, the screens, they're also exactly the same. So up front, you have a semi-digital cluster. Your tachometer and your speedometer are still analog, but you have a large multi-information display in the center. And here, right in the center stack, it's also the same. Even the orientation actually is similar, if not a copy-paste of the one we drove in Japan. Happily, the infotainment system has not been changed from the foreign market models. And that's a good thing because Mitsubishi's new infotainment system looks very crisp, very clear. You know, the graphics are fantastic and it's very, very responsive. And of course, it's got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And to bring it sort of to the new decade, it now has one USB-C port because apparently that's a thing these days, and sorry to those who have USB-As. That being said, you can still port your USB-A and you can link it to your Apple CarPlay / Android Auto. Regardless if it's an Athlete or if it's a GLS 4x4, all four-wheel drive models come with rear diff lock. Now this being the Athlete, of course, it comes with orange highlights regardless of the exterior color. So you have them here on the dashboard, on the secondary glove box cover, and there's more orange on the seat. So it's not just the stitching and the piping here, it's the corners as well. While we're on the subject of the seat, I have to say they're pretty nice and comfy, and I know I've experienced them before, but you know, revisiting these seats, yeah, there's a greater appreciation for that. Oh, mechanical parking brake. So nice to see in a modern pickup. Now, some of you guys prefer the electronic, but personally, for something as utilitarian as this, I prefer the good old lever. So a couple of Athlete exclusives. So for starters, it has advanced driver assist systems. Also exclusive to this model is the drive mode. So it's got, you know, dirt, gravel, mud, ruts, etc. and stuff like that. And it has a 360-degree view camera. It's pretty high definition for, you know, for something in this segment. So props to Mitsubishi for that, and props to Mitsubishi Motors Philippines for not decontenting it. It's a short and sweet drive of this all-new Mitsubishi Triton, but you know, in those short minutes, well, we've managed to learn a lot, but it also helps that we drove the car prior to it landing here. If you're coming from the Strada, this is a very good evolution of the Mitsubishi pickup truck lineup. It may not have the Strada name anymore, but you know what? It's still basically the same truck people have loved for nearly 50 years, or over 50 years in some countries. Now, what we're looking forward to actually is putting this up against some of its biggest rivals. Now, you got Toyota, who's launching the all-new Hilux by 2025. Of course, you have the Ranger, and the Navara and the Isuzu D-Max. So we're genuinely curious how this one fares. But again, as we mentioned earlier, the pickup wars of this decade is just getting heated up.